Hello, my name is Angela Kuznia. I'm a third-year medical student at Michigan State. I'm going to talk about the fifth step in the AMSA Med Ed Curriculum Reform Guide, the implementation of your curriculum piece at your school. So there are several learning objectives for this portion of the curriculum guide. First is to become aware of the logistical concerns in planning a curricular reform event and create a plan for combating them. Second is to obtain ideas for a successful advertising campaign for your curricular reform event. And third is to learn about the use of evaluations, usually surveys, for curriculum reform event attendees. Successful implementation of your curricular reform begins with some serious logistical planning. I hope this first statement, be professional, is obvious and it should be second nature at this point. But if it is not, remember your goals. A. You want to put on a good event. Your professionalism signals to your classmates, professors, and administrators that you are doing your best. B. You want to impress your administrators so that they remember you for the right reasons, so that they will take your curricular concerns seriously. As a busy medical student, you must plan ahead. Create a to-do list of tasks and a timeline with specific deadlines that correspond to your personal schedule. At this point, you should take a few steps back and remember to look at the big picture. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're in the thick of things and you've got exams coming up, stuff going on in your personal life, etc. By simply writing down these logistical details, you can easily set goals and distribute tasks. So you need to identify your target audience. All first-year medical students, all students in the surgery clerkship, students in any year interested in a specific population or training piece. Next, if your event will require funding, you'll have to decide how to obtain adequate money. Then, take a look at relevant calendars and set the date. Start with a list of dates that work for you and your target audience, and then figure out what works for your speaker schedule, what sort of space you'll need, such as a lecture hall, a lab space, and when that will be available. And finally, you need to decide early about your goals for evaluating the event. If you want to put together a poster or attempt to get an article published, you'll have to dedicate much more time to this aspect in your planning process. So now that I'm reminding you of all these things you'll have to do, you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed. Don't worry, you're not alone, and here's how you can get help. You can form an event planning committee as a way to delegate tasks. Additionally, this provides your helpers with a leadership opportunity, which fosters a sense of community and commitment to the project. To find committee members and a faculty mentor, you'll have to do a bit of networking. You can use connections you already have, such as leaders of other student groups and faculty with whom you have already established a relationship. This is also a great opportunity to make new connections. Depending on your location, such as a large college campus, and timing, such as springtime or on the match, pre-meds and fourth-year students could be a great source of help. So the next thing to think about is how you will get people to come to your event. Here you'll have to revisit your big picture outline of your target audience and figure out how to reach them specifically. Depending on your target audience, you'll likely take a different approach. Some good places to start are people committed to your cause, other student groups, and interested faculty. No matter who you're trying to reach, it's imperative that you get the word out. Even if you think you've identified a core group of people, it can't hurt to cast your net wide. You might be surprised by the response. Some ways to do that include mass emails, getting your event added to a school-wide calendar, and flyering at popular spots on campus, such as coffee shops, study areas, or bathrooms. And echoing back to that idea of always being a professional, you should extend a formal invitation to all faculty, staff, and administrators. And to help with your brainstorming, I've listed some additional advertising ideas here. If you're using emails or flyers, you could include a striking fact or statistic in your messages, such as, if you were doing an event about insurance reform, you could include some stats about the number of uninsured Americans and the types of homes they come from, along with a link to the website where someone could get more information. To combat the why bother or I'm too busy mentality, emphasize the perks that might entice students to attend the session, such as networking opportunities or the skills or specific perspective that attendees will gain. And finally, although you may worry about being annoying, it's a good reminder to make an announcement at a required course or before an exam. Alright, the big day is finally here. Since you've done such a great job advertising to your target audience, delegating tasks among your planning committee members, and following your specific timeline, you'll be able to relax on the big day of your event. So your event is over, and you have your own ideas of how it all went down, good or bad. In the spirit of all things medical, your curricular reform piece should include an element of peer evaluation, most likely in the form of a survey. You'll need to think about the evaluation piece well in advance, but I'm placing it here in the presentation because you won't be able to obtain or analyze the feedback until the event has already occurred. So here's where we come back to that idea of formal versus informal evaluations and why you would choose one or the other. While formal evaluations require more work, at least 3 to 4 months for IRB approval and faculty mentoring, that extra work can pay off. You will have increased credibility, and your work will be well suited for a poster presentation, and it may even be publishable. On the other side, informal evaluations are a bit easier to put together and can still provide you with the information you need to improve your project or report back to your school, but these evaluations will have a more limited value to other audiences. In deciding how to obtain feedback, you should again go back to that big picture idea and remind yourself what you are evaluating, who you want to evaluate, how you can best obtain the information you're looking for, and when would be the most opportune time to request this feedback. So here's a breakdown of those different steps. What to evaluate. You should definitely obtain simple demographics, and here you should think about how you can identify whether or not the attendees were actually from your intended target audience. Additionally, you'll want to obtain concrete information about whether people learned from your event. So the type of event will dictate the kind of information you can obtain. You would ask whether people learned X, Y, and Z from a clinical skill or procedural training event, while you might ask questions about attitudes from a cultural sensitivity training session. Who to evaluate. You want to capture the entire audience, students and faculty who attended your event. You might also consider creating a formal evaluation for your planning committee members so that everyone answers the same questions and you can keep an anonymous and organized record in preparation for future endeavors. How to evaluate. There are tons of resources out there, and we'll talk about this more on the next slide. When to evaluate. Again, while I'm placing it in this section after the event, it's something you'll have to think about from the beginning, especially if you're hoping to get published from your evaluations. You'll want attendees to complete both pre- and post-event surveys. And even if you're only doing informal evaluations for your own record keeping, your post-session evaluations can provide important information about attendees' impressions of the session, what they learned, and the type of feedback that we can call constructive criticism. And now back to the issue of how to evaluate. First, it's best if you can obtain anonymous and voluntary feedback. It's important to get the names and number of people who attended your event, but that should be written on a sign-in sheet or elsewhere. If you're creating a survey, here are some quick tips to improve your response rate. First, keep it to a single page. Second, use a Likert scale or multiple choice questions. The Likert scale is when there are 5 options in response to a statement, usually written as strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. Third, limit the number of open-ended questions and use just one if possible. And fourth, only ask relevant demographic questions. For more information on creating evaluations, here's a link to a short 5-page article, and then there's an example of the type of published work your event and formal evaluations could create. And finally, after all you've done, you should create a summary report to show off all of your hard work. I like to think of your summary report as a defense in your case for curricular reform at your school. You want to create a professional-looking document that includes all the pertinent information about your event. This includes some background about the concept of the event and why you thought it was important, the names of the students and faculty who were involved in planning your event, the results of your data analysis from your evaluations, and future directions for your project. And you should send or deliver a copy to all the important stakeholders, your planning committee members, the partnering student groups, your faculty mentors, and of course the dean and school administrators. And this slide marks the end of my portion of the Curriculum Reform Guide. So hopefully all this information will help you in implementing your event at your school.